Okay, so now that we've gone over the creation of a simple foliage asset with a foliage shader, and I've gone and showed you guys how to use the foliage painting tool, you may wonder for a landscape like this very large, multi-kilometer level, how do you handle something like this big? You could actually go in and do the foliage painting. The only thing is that because of how the cold distance works, you're not going to know when you're this far away looking back at your foliage because it's so far away. It's going to cold it so you won't see where you're painting. You might not know you're painting on something it's not supposed to. Also, if you have like this grass texture, you want to be able to just know if I have grass here, I only want grass like to show up. I don't want anything else. So what we can do is we can go in here in the landscape material, and there's a couple nodes that you want to be aware of for this landscape asset to work. So we're going to type in grass, and this option says grass, but it could also be for other assets. The same thing, the foliage painting tool can also be used for like trees and rocks and stuff too. It's just another way of applying various meshes across a certain layer sample. So here we have this grass output, and what's going to happen is by default it will have one array, which normally it's like named grass, or maybe if it doesn't pop up, you can just hit the plus button and then hit grass. And then as you can see here, we don't have this landscape grass type asset yet because this is the first time we're doing it. So if you actually go up here and click it and create one, you can go into your materials. You can name this anything you like. I'll do LS for layer sample, and then grass. And then it creates this new asset similar to like the layer info nodes that we have. So we go and hop in here. Nothing's here yet because we haven't set the element that it's gonna start to populate with. So if I go in here and then I'll type in LOD because that's the name of the grass mesh that we have. You can go in and bring in multiple ones and it'll populate it for you with it. I just want this grass just as a starter. One thing I'm going to make note of is make sure you adjust this grass density. By default, what it's going to do is it's going to populate instantly. That's going to be a big problem if your computers are not good at handling a lot of performance. So let's start off with like 10 at first. So it's going to populate 10 per 10 units, if I'm not mistaken. That's what it said on here. Yeah, 10 meters. Okay, so 10 assets of grass per 10 square meters. So let's hit save. And then you can do the same thing like in the foliage one. You can adjust your scaling on here. So we can do like 0.5 and then say like 2. And then you can even adjust some things like for light maps or for casting shadows or decals or anything like that. We'll hit save. And then now what we're going to need is it needs to sample something to mask out where the grass is going to populate. You could bring in this layer blend node and then just set the texture here and then just set 0 and 0 for each layer, but that's not really efficient. You can actually go in here and type in landscape. And there's a bunch of landscape layer nodes that you can use. One of which is this landscape layer sample. So this one, it's empty because you just have to write in the name of whatever your layer's name is for these. So I have them named in numbers. So I know my layer 1 is my grass one. If you have your layer set to grass already, by all means, just type in grass. Just make sure it's spelled properly. If you don't, it's going to create another layer in the landscape mode. And we don't want that. We want it to take what we already have. So we just plug this guy in. You hit apply and save. And it might slow down a little bit because it's populating. But here we have our grass. We do run into one problem though. We can see that the grass is now populating, but it's also populating on this rock surface that we're using. And that's because technically speaking, If I go into landscape mode, technically this is still grass underneath this, so it's still going to sample that information even though it's showing the rock first. So like if I actually go in here, let me adjust my paint node and change like my radius, and I can start painting like rock and stuff. Let it shader compile a little bit. You can take that off as like a quick fix. But naturally speaking, you don't want to have to keep doing that for everything. And you can do the same thing here. It's not going to populate on it. Um, Another way you could do it is you can actually hop back in here. Remember, we have this layer lerp. We have the alpha from our equation here, and then we have our rock, and we have this. So what we can do is I'm going to copy this lerp. I'm going to create a 1 minus, and then I'm going to drag this mask information, and I'm going to invert it. Because right now what it's doing is it's masking out the white areas for this slope that we're creating to white. But I want everything else to be white. So that's why I'm inverting our mask to be everything but that slope mask. So I'm going to plug this guy in. And then now I'm going to plug in that layer sample that we have here and plug it into the white sample. And then plug that into the grass. And now let's hit apply. So let it compile a little bit. And here you go. Now it auto masks out. It might have some small tuning issues because of where the grass is in relationship to it. Like you can adjust the slope masking information. Maybe you want it to be like this sharp, or maybe you want to make some small adjustments. You can do that. If not, you can always just make another layer with this type of like granite and do the same there. And again, it also does the same thing here with these top ones. Just also be aware, because here at the top, technically, you also have that slope layer here. So it's going to start adding grass in there. So if anything, I would say adjust this slope information as well. You can actually probably set it to take this alpha information for your height lerp. We'll do another lerp. We'll take the alpha information from it. Actually, what we'll do is we'll do the same thing. We'll do a 1 minus. Plug that guy in. Plug him in there. Plug him in, and let's see our result. Thinking. There we go. So now we have it set up so that even with the snow, it's not going to apply that grass to it. And here we have our grass now populated. I mean, it does have a cull distance. So if you actually want to, you can go in here and adjust that culling distance. Maybe 10,000, you want it to be like 25,000. Maybe your computers can handle it. You can do 50,000. Again, this is all on the fly. This is just like instances. Just be very aware of your performance because you're instancing a lot of assets. So let's bring that back to about like 12,000 actually. And it's not just that. The cull distance, you can even adjust your density too. Just again, be aware. What you could do is you can actually probably bring in LODs, or you can maybe have less mesh pieces for this, because right now the vertices and triangles for this guy is about 2,500. You can probably bring in some lower LOD versions of this guy. That way, the further off, it's not going to have that problem. Or you can also just, again, if you're dealing with a landscape like this, if you look at any other game, like in Fallout or Skyrim or even like Grand Theft Auto, they do have foliage. They don't have foliage this dense. It's going to naturally be something like this. Like even probably like 14 or something like this, where it's there to get the point across that there's some foliage. And then what they'll do is they'll place like other foliage and other assets to kind of help with the set dressing. So just be aware of the limitations that you're going to have with this type of asset. If it's a smaller, more condensed level that's not like this open world landscape, then by all means just try foliage, using the foliage painter to sculpt. Or if you want to, you can even go in here. You already have your landscape. You can actually even go in here and do your foliage thing, and then just maybe paint a couple areas too. So let's go and paint. So maybe if you want to, you can actually even go in further and like you have all this for set dressing, maybe, and maybe you want to like have specific areas that are like hero areas for your level. You can go in, we'll just adjust our brush a little bit, and we'll adjust our density just a little bit more. And in certain areas, you can even paint in a little bit more density. Like maybe you want an area where your player could like sneak or something. So you can hop in here, adjust your density a little bit, and then boom, now you have some foliage here, but it's only in this dense pocket and not anywhere else. It's just how you want to place it. Again, you're working with two different versions of the instance. Just be very aware when you're doing all this. Look in the optimization views in your shader complexity. Let it think a little bit, and just notice how far and your performance of this guy. Because remember, you're bringing in this one mesh that's about 2,000 tries. If you're bringing in, this is most likely like 1,000. Think about that. That's well over 2 million polygons right off the bat. So be very wary of how you're handling your little bits of foliage and stuff. But yeah, that is essentially another way you can handle populating and propagating foliage, especially with the use of a landscape shader.